Great. Got it. All right, record away if you must.
Anyway, I can only join you for half an hour because I have a class start at 9 o'clock. I need to get myself ready for it.
All righty, well
I'll
then,
join you for full 2 hours tomorrow.
make sure that you say everything that has to be said then the next 7 minutes.
You're muted. No
I
voice.
got a bad cough. Okay, so I'm gonna drop out for a sec.
It's supposed to be your session. You want to have a topic today.
I'm sorry, I had a bad voice cough.
Okay, no worry. Too much chili, too much good food. Deep fried food.
Did you see where there was a hot taco chip challenge where there's this brand of taco chips that's got two really hot peppery spices in it, and it was a viral challenge. And some young college kid in Worcester, Mass was challenged to eat two.
Mm-hmm.
He did. He went to the hospital and he died.
Wow.
So they're pulling him off the shelf, at least in some states.
Wow. I didn't know about that. Yeah.
It was in the news just the last couple of days.
Wow. That's heavy. I mean, people that never deal with spicy food, they have no idea. I had my spiciest food ever in my entire life was right after my high school. I just go visit a family's home. And what happened was his mom pulled out a dish for the dinner, and I stick my spoon in there faster before he said, no, do that. And he say, what happened? They say, well, that's my mom's special dish. Nobody touch it. I say, well, I only dip it, so I pull it out without any, just have the sauce like stick to it, right? I say, well, don't even touch the sauce. I say, we'll see. I touch it with my tongue. Man, I tell you, I regret it for the entire night.
Yeah, well, you're lucky you survived.
I couldn't believe it because I grew up in a spicy environment where in Malaysia, we eat spicy food all day long, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I can handle whatever is coming my way. Like, no, I was wrong.
Yeah.
It must be. Yeah, go ahead.
There's stories about these hot sauces that are super hot. They're very dangerous.
Yeah, very dangerous. Yeah.
So Joshua turned his camera on for a second, so we know he's here.
Yeah, he's.
My problem is not a cough. Oh, hi, Joshua.
Hello, yeah, I'm here just last week of Cusella leaving me on Saturday mornings. So that I made her switch to Fridays. So I can be back on the call. So
Okay.
yep. How you guys doing?
I'm waiting for hay fever season to be over in New England. I've never had hay fever here until this year.
Yeah.
Oh wow. It's the end of summer thing?
I think it's the end of a New England climate thing. I think between the heavy rain and the heat, I imagine that some invasive species, either ragweed or something comparable, has moved in, and now it's as if I was back in Nebraska again. Which is where ragweed is the state flower.
You were better last week, right? I remember you.
It wasn't too bad. I mean, if I open these windows, that's bad news. And I've had them closed mainly because it's been really hot. So when it's super hot, I just have the AC on and don't have any windows open.
Get an air filter.
Well, yeah, but the thing is that air filter doesn't filter out pollen. It's too small.
It works pretty good. Get a HEPA filter.
There is electrostatic filters, which sometimes might work. Yeah. But I don't have the electrostatic. I just have the conventional filters.
You can make one with all the equipment that you have.
Well,
come on.
Maybe. By the way, short story, we decided to buy another Logitech C930E webcam for the club.
Right.
And this one happens to be manufactured by a different manufacturer, a company called Sonics Technology in Vietnam.
Hmm.
And it looks identical to the one that you could buy a few years ago, except for the fact that it's manufactured by somebody else. It comes with different firmware than the previous one, and it doesn't work with Logitune, the thing that lets you do zoom, pan, and tilt.
Hmm.
Doesn't work. And that's why we bought it. So we're gonna have to send it back. And
Yeah,
figure
that's
something.
not a Logitech camera. That's a what we call third party. So they try to
It's
copy.
made for Logitech. It's got the Logitech logo on it.
Wow.
It's got the Logitech vendor ID and the product ID for USB, but it has one additional thing. It has a manufacturer's name, which is not Logitech.
Mhm.
And when I tried to update the firmware update failed, and it reported the serial number as SN0001.
Wow.
They all have the same serial number, and they don't have updatable firmware. It's a different firmware.
Wow.
It doesn't.
Where you got it from? You got it from Amazon?
Yeah. I don't know which vendor, but he got it from some vendor on Amazon. Whether they're an authorized
Yeah, I think it's a fake one.
vendor or third
I
party.
think you got a fake one. No question about it. I can tell.
Well, I mean, it says it's made. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, we have a lot of this kind of stuff in Logitech is the most copy fake product out there on Amazon. I know because I saw, I think I told you before, right? I saw over $1 million worth of Logitech webcam on Amazon. So I know this business well.
So the ones that are made by Sonics are not made on behalf of Logitech.
Yeah, no, they did it themselves. They just do whatever they want. Yeah, it's a fake manufacturer. Yeah, I can assure you that.
I guess I should look them up because the company is for real. Sonics Technology is a real company.
Again, this could be fake. Is there somebody's? Yeah, they want to pay. They print whatever they want to print on it. Don't trust that. Yeah, because at the end of the day, the firmware is to make the difference. To make the difference is the real thing. Yeah.
Well, definitely the firmware up. When you bring up Logitune, it wants to update the firmware because it tried to read the firmware version and got nothing.
Yeah.
And then the firmware update fails.
I'm 100% sure that this is a fake product. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll float that theory, but I don't know how to prove it.
Yeah. The proof is very simple. The software doesn't work with this hardware because Logitech has so. Could you believe this? This is so crazy. Amazon will make the vendor that sell Logitech product have a 3D serial code that have to match whatever the Logitech has. So think of it this way: you have to have a feedback loop that get the barcode off the box, pull it. They have a secret code that they will match. It's something of like credit card number. So if you read the credit card number, it doesn't match the pattern they expect it will fail you. So it won't allow you to sell this particular product.
I'll have to ask the guy who purchased it for the club if he can somehow. I don't know if it came in a box.
I don't think he bought it from Amazon.
He said he bought it from Amazon, some vendor on Amazon, but he doesn't know who. However, Amazon has a blanket policy that you can return anything within, I think it's 3 weeks or something.
Yeah.
So I told him, I said, let's just return it and ask for our money back and say the reason is it doesn't work with Logitune and doesn't have the right firmware in it.
Yeah.
And figure something else out.
Yeah. I would love for him to have you forward the link to me, the whatever product, that page that he bought from. It'll take me a few seconds to figure this out for you.
I'll have to ask him to find the Amazon vendor.
Link. Yeah.
Because he just brought the unit in. I never saw the Amazon page that he bought it from. I'll have to ask him.
Right.
But I'll tell him you think it's a ripoff. It's not a genuine.
Yeah, it is. I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah.
Because if Logitech had farmed it out legitimately to Sonics, and this was made by Sonics,
Mhm.
presumably would have the right firmware in it,
Yep.
and it would have a real unique serial number.
Yep.
Because the rest of the USB, the vendor ID and the product ID were correct.
Yeah. I'm looking at the Amazon website right now. There are lot. I just type in the word, C, the 930E, right? Logitech, right?
P930E,
Yeah.
but I don't know which vendor he bought it from.
Yeah, that's a $59 version. That's a $56 version. Yeah.
There's
Okay.
also the 920,
Yeah.
which I don't really know that there's much difference between 920 and 930.
Yeah, I saw a lot of those 920 and 930 at all altogether. I probably still have some unopened box in my office. Yeah.
But the main reason we wanted it was so that we could zoom and pan the room.
Right.
Although I'll tell you, I mean, we have one that one of the members owned, a legitimate one. And I was using it last week.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 weeks, I'll use it for 2 weeks with the Logitune control panel.
Right.
Not my favorite. It
Yeah.
works, but it's
Clumsy.
so first of all, you have to set aside a portion of your screen for the control panel,
Right.
and you got to be careful not to cover it because it's hard to,
See, yeah.
and then when you pan and tilt, it's in steps.
Right.
It's not continuous. You got to hit a button and it jumps a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when somebody stands up and they don't stand in front of the podium, they stand off to the side. You got to tick, tick, tick,
Yeah.
tick until you get them centered again.
Yeah. Yeah.
He said for about $200, he could buy a duplicate of his old Sony Handycam, one that uses the iLink.
Mm-hmm.
I said the only problem with that is at the moment I only have one Dell laptop that has the iLink port. We'd have to have another laptop that still has the iLink ports on it. And they stopped including them around 2016, 2017. I think the last Dell model that came with an iLink port was around manufactured 2016 and sold 2017.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when you have a manufacturer facilities and you try to create product, and if you don't have the contract with a real manufacturer, which they also press the price on you or whatever you call that. Anyway, so they make fake products. Cisco is number one. A lot of fake product out there, and Logitech's another one that's really popular because it's easy.
So, but can you confirm that Sonic's technology in Vietnam was a legitimate manufacturer for Logitech, but the Sonic's name could also be hacked?
Yeah, I mean, it's no different than somebody send. I have people that actually use my email, send email to me. You know that, right? So yeah, you can copy, you can print any name you want and say they claim that it is what it is. Like, it's not true. So
Yeah.
the functionality of the product is ultimate test, whether it's work or doesn't work.
But if it's a what's the correct term for a copied product? God, I can't remember the term. I can't remember English vocabulary anymore.
No, tell me about it. Let me think of a second. It's not fake. It's I know it's a rip-off.
Yeah, it's not authentic. It's not authentically made by the company that I used to be able to recall vocabulary. I can't anymore.
Okay, let's get the AI in place. Okay, what do you call
An imitation product not made by the real manufacturer? I mean, ripoff is sort of the right word, but it's not the word that you're supposed to use.
May I chime in?
Yeah,
That would be a fugazi. Fugazi.
that's an Italian word.
Yeah, it's a good one. That's
What
a
does it
fake.
mean? How does it translate into English?
I'd be curious to know if that's actually in the English dictionary, fugazi.
I found a word. I found a word. Counterfeit.
Counterfeit, that's the word, counterfeit.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
What's the epistemology of the word counterfeit, though? It doesn't seem to fit. It's counterfeiting.
Well,
it's
that's
FEIT,
yeah.
counterfeit.
FEIT?
Yeah, it's FEIT. I don't know.
So like defeat or counterfeit?
I guess we got to go.
Let me put it in the chat for you.
What is the etymology of counterfeit?
I'm partial to fugazi. That's all I wanted to chime in. I don't want to mess up your flow. I'm fugazi.
That with an S or a Z?
Yeah, right there.
Try both ways. It's would be a translation. It would be a fake translation from Italian. So
Is there
I've just heard it in movies.
an Italian word like fugazi with a Z or fugasi that means counterfeit or fake? Matt, what am I asking? I'm asking ChatGPT. The term fugazi is actually not an Italian word, but it's often associated with Italian American slang. It's scrolling. I wait, let's stop scrolling. The term is used to describe something that is fake or counterfeit. It's commonly used in the US, especially in urban settings and among military personnel. The origins of the term are somewhat unclear, but it's widely understood to mean something that is not genuine. In Italian, the word for fake or counterfeit may be falso or contraffatto. These are terms you would use in formal Italian context to describe something that's not authentic. So it doesn't really know where it comes from except the US military slang. I could try a different source. That was ChatGPT. Let's try Bard.
Just got drop off. You're back. Yay.
Comes from the hip hop community, according to Bard, in the 1980s. Derived from the Italian word fuga, F-U-G-A, like fugitive, it means escape. In the context of hip hop, fugazi is used to describe something that is fake or not genuine. So fugazi is like the same root as fugitive, escaped. Let's see if Llama 2 thinks the same thing. Yes, the Italian word for counterfeit or fake is contraffatto. Oh, we already knew that. Falsificato.
You don't have to go off on this, Barry. It's just a slang thing. It doesn't mean anything. Just nonsense. It's a slang Italian American term.
Well,
It's not
evidently,
real.
maybe it's urban hip hop, but that's just speculation. So
No, it's not urban hip hop. I'm from the urban hip hop community. It's not urban hip hop. It's just an Italian slang word for Italian Americans back in the 1930s and 40s.
well, 30s and 40s.
It's an old. Yeah, it's an old slang term. Yeah.
Not from 1980s.
No. I mean, it was used in the 80s in gangster movies and stuff like that, but it's just slang. It's, in other words, we're talking nonsense. It's slang.
Okay.
Yeah.
Barry, you're using the Llama 2, which website are you using? Are you using the www.llama2.ai? Is that the link you're using?
Yeah, that's the one. I think that's the only place that I know of.
Llama2.ai.
Yeah, Llama2.ai
Yeah.
is the one that gives you the free access to Llama 2, which was funded by Meta, funded by Zuckerberg.
No, it's not. This Zuckerberg is the one that provide the source code, but this one is Anderson's website or something.
He didn't help fund the development of it. I thought
He funded the development of it, but this website specifically is funded by somebody else, one of the AOL co-founder or something. Let me see if I can find it. Anderson is what I remember the name. The rich billion.
And it's the next generation of Llama 1 or Llama no number.
Yeah, and Anderson is the guys, he created this website so that you don't have to download and implement it and all that stuff. So
And it comes in three levels of
flavor.
size. What do you call that? How many tokens or how many
Yeah.
neurons or whatever that sizey thingy is.
Yeah. By the way, I'm not sure you hear me or not. I'm leaving in about 10 minutes, so because I have a class start at 9 o'clock. I need to
Yeah.
get myself ready for it. So
But what's the topic of the class? Too complicated to answer.
no, it basically it's a mastermind. We get together, and the topic is basically whatever, typical issue would be, how to be better, self-help,
Self-development, personal development.
and sometimes there's some process you go through, give feedback to. So I'll just give one example, right? One of the feedback we do is that you tell the group, let's say you have a small group, 3 or 4 people, 3 or 5 people, you give whatever your issue is, and then they can ask you question to clarify your issue, to make sure they understand your issue. And then you take your chair, you flip it around. Now you're back against them. Now they talk behind your back, you're supposed to take note or do some recording or whatever you want to do. And they talk about you in your back. Then you turn back and you say, well, okay, person 1, I give you 3 points out of 10. That your feedback was this much useful to me. And person number 2, maybe 8 points. And then person number 3, maybe 10 points. So it's relevancy of so it's sort of like feedback. Can you see the whole dynamic of this little exercise? I mean, this is the things that we do.
Yeah. I'll have to tell you next time, or maybe tomorrow, about the high-tech schmoo. You probably won't recognize this. There was a comic strip called Little Abner, and Al Cap was the cartoonist, and it was a kind of a satirical comic strip. But one of the things that was in it was a creature called a shmoo. Shmoo is actually a Yiddish word. Shmoo is basically somebody who takes a lot of abuse and just it rolls off their back and they pop right back up again. And there was this you could actually make one. It had a kind of a round bottom and a small top, kind of like a snowman shape, but only 2 parts instead of 3. And you could knock it over and it would bop back up again.
Oh, okay.
And I invented a high-tech shmoo that had the physical shmoo that you could hit it and it would bounce back. But also it sat on a platform that was a voice-operated tape recorder.
Oh.
So not only could you punch the shmoo and it would pop back up, but you could yell at it and it would automatically record the yelling. And it came with colored magic markers, so you could write graffiti on it. And the idea was the shmoo was basically, it's round. So basically it has 4 sides if you divide it into 4 parts. So every side was one member of the family. So if you're mad at one member of the family, you go to that side of the shmoo, you'd yell at it, you'd punch it, you put graffiti on it, and it would record it. And then later on, that person would play back the stuff that was, ranting at them. And then they could go to the other person and do the same thing. You yell at it, and punch it, and write graffiti on it. So it was the high-tech shmoo. And I had an artist at Bell Labs actually draw a sketch of it. And she says, this needs to be a real thing.
Right. So is that a real thing now?
No, it was just an idea. And I just had some artist make a sketch of it. I still have the sketch.
Right.
It's sitting in the bookcase in a room. And
I think it would be relevant today for today's market. I think it's
I think you could actually buy the physical shmoo, sort of the
right. Yeah, we play with that so the way they come, it's a plastic, and then on the bottom you can fill in the water so the bottom is heavy, right? So when you punch the top, it's light, it come right back, but no recording. So
the point was, I'm pretty sure you could actually buy shmoos
right.
that were popular in the 1960s or 70s or whatever.
Right.
But adding a voice-activated recorder at the base, and that you could use washable magic markers to write graffiti, and each side was one member of the family that you wanted to yell at.
Yeah, I'm more interested to create a digital version so that you can use your mouse to drag it which side they can have multiple sides. Let's say you have 20 20 members family, you know, then you can have 20 sides instead of just 4, right?
Right. So if you know somebody who can create computer interface, you could turn it into
It's a game. It's a
virtual
game.
virtual.
Yes, it's a game. Yeah, it should be fine. Josh should be able to do that with the help of AI.
Does Josh write code for computer animation stuff?
It's not that hard. I just don't have the bandwidth for it.
Yeah, I mean, I came up with a concept, but I stole the concept from El Cap, the cartoons. Go ahead, Josh.
When I was a kid, there was a TV show, if I'm not mistaken. I'm going back to my deep memories as a child, called The Schmooze, and it was a whole cartoon series. So that's I'll have to find it and send it to you.
The blue ones?
Yeah, just
they weren't called
look it up.
Schmooze. I know what you're talking about, but they weren't called Schmooze. They were called, what were they called?
I'll look it up. I'm pretty sure it was Schmooze.
What?
Yes, I don't think they're hard. I mean, it's a very simple object. I would say that would be good. The tricky part is how do you punch it harder and softer? That's how do you do that? So you press more key, it has more power. If you have one key, there's a gentle touch. That part is
Smurfs. You're thinking of Smurfs.
Smurf.
The Smurfs were the blue characters,
Yeah.
but the Schmoo is basically just a shape.
No, Barry, I'm not mistaken at all. It was a Schmoo. They had the houses. I just looked it up. It
was the El Cap thing.
It was the Al Cap thing turned into an animated series.
I didn't know that existed.
Mm-hmm. I'm not mistaken. I know the difference between Smurfs and Schmoos. Just
look at the link of the Sam Sand.
I know the difference between Smurfs, Schmoos, and Smoots on the bridge on the way over from Kendall Square. So, yep. But it's been done. Are you going to your thing, Sam?
Yeah, I'm going in a few minutes. Yeah, 3 more minutes.
Okay.
I got 3 more minutes of enjoyment here.
Okay, well, I'm before you have to rush off, I'm saying goodbye. And I was just going to say the big news this week, at least that's living for me, not that anyone asked, but is analog computing from IBM. I find that to be absolutely fascinating. I was curious if you guys have any history with analog computing, and if you guys are also curious what they're doing.
Yeah, but probably I want to look into it before I say anything. I'll make a note for myself. Analog computing from IBM.
Yeah, I'll put a link in the chat too.
Yeah, thank you.
I built some simple ones 40 years ago with op amps.
Yep, there were Schmoo branded Schmoo Tails, Schmoo Dells, Schmoo Snacks. Terry Tunes basically got the rights to turn it into all kinds of products. Yep. Like in the 1950s and 60s, I think, was the epoch of the productizing the Schmoo.
Josh, your link doesn't come through yet. I'm just letting you know.
But in the cartoon, they were white. They weren't blue in the cartoon, in the comic strip. Is Josh frozen? He is frozen, isn't he?
Yeah, he's frozen. So Smooth is a heavy butt.
Now he's live again.
Yeah.
I'll have to see if I can find.
Okay, you got it.
There might be some YouTube videos with the cartoon Schmoo.
Thank you.
Certainly be photographs of it in Google Images.
IBM has developed a new device.
Okay, I'll look it up.
Is that you? Was that you?
I just played the video. I just played the video. Yeah. All right, sounds good.
But yeah, it certainly could be turned into an interactive. I wouldn't call it a game, I don't think, but
It's a game. I mean, think of it this way: I mean, you get your frustration out.
Right.
You
rant.
out, rang it, and do whatever you need to do.
Yeah, you rant.
And it's no harm. I mean, from the perspective, the only harm that you got is that you release your pressure, your frustration. Yeah, it's a good thing. Yeah.
Then you can reciprocate because the person can play it back and
Yeah. Give you
it
feedback. Yeah. Create a feedback loop that you say how ridiculous it was, and now that you release it, how do you feel about it now?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going.
Enjoy your session.
Yeah, thank you.
Figure out who's talking behind your back, Sam.
Okay, good for you.
Cheers.
Okay, well, we can choose a new topic.
Oh, I'm really curious to know, Sam mentioned that he did analog computers 40 years ago, so I'm super curious.
We actually had huge breadboards. We got a bunch of op amps. We got a bunch of resistors. We made a bunch of different analog circuits that pretty much corresponded to functions. You know, a typical function would be a multiplier function. Another function would be what is it? You'd put a cap on a signal. What was that called?
Like a
bandwidth. Bandwidth. Anyway, you attend
band limited. You could put an amplitude cap and a band limited cap.
That's right. That's right. So frequency limiters. So you basically just take different functions and you could figure out what different combination of devices would produce that function. And then you could actually see it, you know, the signal come out on the other end if you actually turned on this thing. So simple analog computing in that sense was what I was exposed to way back in the, dare I say, 80s.
Yeah, I beat you by 20
We actually had to
years.
solder these devices onto a breadboard.
Yeah. In the 1960s, was it EAI? Was that the name of the company that sold analog computers? We had one in the EE department, and I programmed up some differential equations on it. And the one that I really had fun with, I had learned about a differential equation called van der Pol's equation. And what's interesting about it is it had a very nice limit cycle. And so I programmed it up and got a flatbed plotter that could plot the value of the function and its derivative. And it had a limit cycle that could go from an oval to almost a square, depending on how you adjusted the one of the parameters. And I actually wrote that up. I spent about a week and wrote up a little paper on van der Pol's equation using the analog computer to make copies of it.
But I don't know the reference to the recent IBM analog computation. What is that all about?
I think the reference is in order to use, you know, with your average digital computer, you have to keep using more and more power. So they're trying to fix that problem of different, not more compute, but different compute with less power. So efficiency in compute power with the idea of running neural networks and trying to make it so that as you scale up, you scale down in power. I think that's the idea for IBM. So I'm still trying to, I don't know anything about analog computing. I know nothing.
Seems like the precision you can get is not very good, unless you spend a lot of money on DACs and ADCs.
And what are DACs?
Digital and analog computers, and then analog to digital converters.
Well, they're actually making a completely new chip.
I know, but that
So-
portion of it would determine how precise you can be.
I would imagine so. Yeah, this is not my expertise. So in other words, for my thinking, I'm just logically thinking is in order to make this new generation of, let's just say, cybernetic computing, where you're dealing with computer brain. Hey, oh, I'm getting a shot by light. Nice job. So anyway, I'll let you guys know. Hey, So anyway, we're gonna figure this thing out. Take a look at the video I put up there, and then I'd love to have a conversation at some point. But
Okay.
it's fascinating to me that the real question I wanted to ask though, Sam, when you said the limiters, what were you limiting exactly on the frequencies when you were building the analog computers?
I think these things were operating on frequencies. So we were actually cutting off frequencies of various different levels. And I'm not sure what that really allowed us to do, except maybe approximate certain values. What else did it do? All I remember is we had all the additions worked out. Addition, multiplication, subtraction. I'm not sure if we had division worked out in an analog way.
Well, I'm going to study up a little bit more on analog computing because I'm still trying to wrap my head on which frequencies are being used and what power it takes to run that frequency. So I'm more interested in the architecture. But yeah, I wish I didn't have to watch a kid right now. I could have a real conversation with you guys. Sorry.
Because it's still debatable whether or not the actual neuronal activity, is that truly analog, or is there still some, I mean, as each chemical gets transmitted between synapses, is that a digital operation, or is that still part of an analog operation? I still don't know.
Well, that's what I've been studying is Michael Levine's work at Tufts University on biomorphogenic fields. And what he's trying to figure out is the pathways that are created. There's not one way to go through these paths of electrical signals through cells and cell junctions and gaps in between the cells. There's multiple ways. And that's the problem with anyone trying to figure this out. It's kind of like figuring out how someone did a Photoshop job. What non-destructive method did they use? And is it actually non-destructive? So if it's destructive, you got cancer. So in other words, the way that the field itself is sending signals is different in each individual and each different part of the body and each different DNA sequence or protein folding. Not to get too out there, but they study things like planaria and frogs because the way the signals, the electrical signals, are sent through the bodies of frogs is very different than a human. So frogs can regenerate limbs, whereas technically we as humans can only generate the limb once because that signal is only sent during the time of birth. But if you could figure out how to resend that signal and you had enough information, it is definitely a combination, I think, of analog and digital if you look at DNA structures as digital. Is that what you mean, Sam?
There's a lot of questions there. Yeah, that would definitely be in the whole realm of how digital is it, how analog is it?
And is the human body a digital thing or an analog thing?
Yes.
That's the real question. That's the $100 million question.
It's quanta. You could say quanta are digital, but then higher order phenomena could be viewed as analog, and then above that, neurons could still be signal by signal. So I don't know.
That's my theory, is at one level it's analog, then it goes to digital, then it goes back to analog, and it just keeps waving as above, so below to multiple levels that go infinitely in and infinitely out, which is super confusing for a scientist or a rational person to say, okay, pi all the way in, pi all the way out. Like, what are we talking here? It's very confusing because it's not rational, it's irrational.
The real problem is where you put a binary dichotomy in a feedback loop where you really want a proportional feedback adjustment.
And vice versa.
Well, the only place where I know you can get away with binary dichotomy is in turning on your furnace or your air conditioner. You can turn it full blast on for a period of time, or its duty cycle. And you could have fairly long intervals of on and off, and there's no rheostat to have it halfway on. Whereas a dimmable light bulb, you can chop the DC, or you can chop the AC and turn it on and off. And for filament light bulbs, that seems to be okay. I don't know about LEDs. They don't necessarily like to be chopped. Some of them do, some of them don't.
Depends on the diode, yeah.
Um,
Uh,
so duty cycles versus proportional voltage
but
adjustment.
but in a thought experiment, if you're thinking of, you know, a heating system, if you broke down your house into small, like, you know, area units of 1 foot by 1 foot and created its own ecosystem within that 1 foot by 1 foot, how many sensors would you have of the heat in that? You know what I mean? In other words, like you could turn your whole house into the size of a giant warehouse or something. You know what I mean? Like, in other words, there's little ecosystems within your house that you can't even see the perturbations of little spinning, swirling heat structures on the floor in a tiny corner.
I'll tell you a funny story. You know, they just released a point update to Mac OS, at least Ventura. And when it's doing an update, you just get the little Apple logo in the middle of the screen and the rest of the screen is blank. And while it was doing the update, which takes 15 minutes or so, and I happened to put my hand in front of the monitor, and I could actually, without have my eyes open, I could tell where the Apple was because it was slightly warmer. I could actually feel the warmth of the glowing Apple as opposed to the black screen everywhere else. And I could close my eyes and do this. I could say, there's the Apple. Yep. It was just a little bit more infrared.
So, and if you can imagine, that can go on infinitely into the Apple and the layers of the skin and which parts. In other words, it's kind of amazing that you can scale up and scale down as at whatever size you want.
Yeah.
So the question is, can you build sensors? And that's why I think the human body is so amazing.
Yeah.
Is the amount of sensors that are in the body is more than the amount of routing nodes.
Look at the number of photoreceptors in the back of the eyeball and the retina. I don't know, was there millions of them? Somebody can tell me how many. But
I don't know. That's a great question.
although the new cameras have a lot more receptors per square millimeter than the eyeball, I think. They got millions or billions on these little cameras for high resolution.
I don't know. I just started looking into astrophotography, and I was researching a new camera for $500 that will work in the daylight and be used as a telescope to focus all the way on the other side of the mountain between one tree and another. So I'm blown away by, for the price of $500, that's amazing. And it connects to your smartphone.
I think cameras now have more resolution than the human eyeball. For the size of the receptor.
I would believe that would be true. I'm sure at certain prices for sure. But to me, I think we're moving into this really fascinating world. But I don't know what you guys' thoughts are on ARM computing and then moving to quantum computing and then possibly going into analog computing back into, you know, there's some sort of new structure I think that's going to be created that looks nothing like the computers we've had in the last 50 years.
Well, I can see hybrid with some analog and some digital, whichever one is the most efficient for the application.
That's what I see too. What do you see, Sam?
I don't even have time to stay current on a lot of this.
Yeah. If you're doing probabilities like Bayesian inference with probabilities, I think analog may actually be better than digital.
I agree.
Fuzzy logic is really analog.
And there's more information to be taken that way.
Well, you have, for example, if you don't know if something's true or false, and you have a degree of belief that's pretty sure it's true, right? Some amount of uncertainty, being able to say your degree of belief is anywhere from 0 to 1, or maybe 0 to -1 for I'm pretty sure it's false. -1 definitely false. 0, I'm not so sure. +1 absolutely true. I could see an analog, you know, continuum for degrees of belief or disbelief.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of
I
people
could
get stuck. They think it's either true or false. There's only 2 values. No, there's degrees of belief.
I think that's why they built binary computers. I think that was the mistake that we made years ago. It worked to get us to where we are now, but it's not an ultimate solution to
You can
computing
make a
problems.
flip-flop Because you can make a flip-flop out of 2 vacuum tubes or 2 transistors, and flip-flop was easy to make.
Yeah.
It's harder to make something that could hold a voltage anywhere from off to on.
Well, yeah, I don't think we make it. I think it just exists naturally.
Well, I think in the brain it does, because in the brain, the quanta are molecules, individual molecules. So you could have a density of molecules of neuropeptides because it's chemistry. And so you can have a whole mole of molecules, probably not a whole mole, but substantial 10 to the 10th, 10 to the 20th, whatever. That's calculus is pebbles. How tiny are the pebbles? Molecule-sized pebbles? Granular how granular?
Yeah, that's where I go into philosophy at that point, because when you, at least for me in my younger years, I was like, okay, if things are this way, that's the way they are. And I just understood it as that's the way it is. There's no, it's something else. It's possibly, potentially. No, it's either is or isn't. It's either true or false. Let's just stop with all this gray area. It's ridiculous.
There's either a molecule there or there's not a molecule there. But there's a lot of there. But there's
it's either matter or it's not matter. It's not a wave or matter. It's like, let's just in other words, reductionist thinking will always create just by thinking in philosophically. If you think in terms of yes and no, off and on, 1, 0, you'll always find the ability to wrap that narrative around any mathematical problem, or anything will always be reduced to up or down.
Yeah.
But if you want to think binary, you create binary, is what I'm saying.
And then you get oscillation. A pendulum is basically an oscillation. The mean value of the pendulum is straight down, but it's almost never there. If you count how often is it there and how often is it there, it spends most of its time at the extremes where it's moving very slowly, and almost no time at the mean where it's moving fast.
And you could say the same thing about an atom with the electrons and the protons.
Yeah.
Most of the time it's not there.
Yeah. What's the mean between masculine and feminine? Most people have markedly masculine features and or markedly feminine features. There aren't a whole lot of bearded women. And the ones that have hybrid features are freaks, and they're in freak shows.
Yeah, what's the usefulness of masculine and feminine? Meaning, I just heard the other day they're trying to put uteruses inside of men. And if they do accomplish that and men start having babies, there's no more, a man is feminine. You know what I mean? There's if you make a hybrid of a man that can have a baby, now you're, what are those?
Make a clone.
What are they called in nature? Those asexual, like a worm that can just produce. Yeah.
Parthenogenesis. That's one word for it. I don't know. There's probably more than one term. Parthenogenesis is technically virgin birth. You don't need a sperm or a pollen or from another gender. But there was an interesting story yesterday about perspiration, because perspiration is a mix of all kinds of stuff, and you can actually in intimacy, the content of your sweat is a very powerful signal across species, not across species, across genders. And what they found was that in romance, if you can detect the aroma of the other party, looky here. One of the things that they found is that people would mate based on just aroma if the two parties had complementary immune systems. So the male had some immunity for some pathogens, and the female had a complementary set of immunities. You could detect that in the sweat, and people naturally would want a partner who had the complementary immunity, so the children would have both, a wider spectrum of immunity. That was a fairly recent research on what's in perspiration.
Yeah. Did you see the Mark Robler? Are you familiar with his work on the internet? He's
No,
the gentleman that he got famous. I think he just gave the commencement speech at MIT this last year, but he was famous for doing a squirrel athletic course in his backyard. He's an
oh, I saw
engineer.
the videos. Yeah, I didn't remember the guy's name, but yeah, he made this,
Yeah.
kept adding the next section after they mastered the previous sections.
Yeah, so I just brought him up because his last video was trying to take a tracking sniffing dog and take it off its scent. So it was an interesting idea of how many things could I do to make the dog think that I went to the left when I really went to the right.
Yeah.
And the ability of this dog was almost magical. Like he tried everything from
Couldn't
fans,
fool him.
could
Well,
not fool the
ants,
dog.
I mean, ants can smell formic acid. They drop formic acid along your trail, and the ants find the food. The trail is full of formic acid. The ants can follow the formic acid trail, which evaporates in a matter of hours. So it has just the right staying power.
But what I'm saying is, like, you're talking about pheromones and chemical signals at the smallest per amount
molecule. The
per
nose
molecule.
some people can recognize a scent by a single molecule. Most
That's
people need
amazing.
a lot more than, but there are people, a single molecule is enough. For,
It's mind blowing when you think about all the subconscious things that are going on, especially in the mating situation between two individuals, meaning the dog sniff between identical twins, even the molecule differences. So that's
it's the key in the lock. You change one nib on the key and it doesn't open the lock anymore.
Yeah, that's just completely fascinating how many people are messing with that natural thing by putting on these perfumes and colognes and they're just messing with nature, like the natural thing. Yeah.
But
and they wonder why there's so many divorces. Anyway, that's my take on it.
I don't know that that's from molecules. That may be from antisocial behavior or getting on each other's nerves or something like that.
I'm joking, but I'm saying there's a subconscious chemical perception going on for sure. Like I've noticed that when I go to parties with people, when I was in my younger 20s, and I'd watch different people hook up with different people, and I'd say, that's not your type. You don't like that person. But the more alcohol they got in them, the less what they thought they wanted, and the more the subconscious of the smell of that person or the pheromone, like what attracted people to each other, was fascinating.
You know, talking about what's attractive, the amount of actual content on Facebook has been diminishing. The number of people who show up on a regular basis of saying things is diminishing. I'm down to about half a dozen people. So Facebook has to put stuff in your news feed that's not coming from your friends, because your friends are not. So I don't know if it's what they're doing for women, but I've noticed that my news feed is filling up with cheesecake photos on the birthday of a famous person, usually a gorgeous female actor or performer. You get, like, the last week it was Linda Ronstadt, was like every fifth one was Linda Ronstadt, either in a glamour shot or a bikini shot or, revealing shot. And almost every day, I think more than half of the stuff in my newsfeed is now cheesecake with, gorgeous women, with curvaceous and revealing costumery or glamour shots. And
yeah, I just watched I have it bookmarked. I've only watched the first 15 minutes, but it's a gentleman from Stanford University. His last name is NG. I forgot his first name, but he's explaining how the new algorithms with AI models, the new neural, how they've been using that for the last 4 to 5 years in marketing. It's really well done. So he was saying there's a whole field to go into. And philosophically, Yuval Harari talked about this in his book, 21 Problems for the 21st Century, that the algorithms of these language model type of neural network compute will know you better than you. In other words, you don't even know that you like bicycle riding, and the computer has seen that your eye has looked more when every time a bicycle came up versus a car versus a house, Like these, what I'm trying to say is he predicted a time when the computer knows you better than you know yourself. And we're living in that now. Most people don't know that's what's being fed to you on these algorithms.
Yeah.
Like
I
it's
also
really
think that
amazing.
some of these cheesecake shots, I'm pretty sure, I can't prove it. I think some of them are synthetic. They take real photographs of the person and then they generate synthetic versions of it where they're wearing costumery that's like steampunk or CGI or something so that you recognize the face, but their skin is so perfect and their curves are so perfect and the costumes are so extreme that you think that's not a photograph. That's
Very,
gotta be
it's been fake for the last 10 years. Like, in other words, it's just getting really good fake.
yeah.
Like, do you use any of these things like Leonardo.ai or Midjourney?
I know about them, and I even got an account on Discord. Had something for what's the name of the one that's on Discord? I can't remember the name of it. I signed up for it, but I never figured out how to use it. I never
Okay.
figured out how to give it prompts.
If you just go to the web and say, what are some example of prompts, and you see the logic that they give, you can start using that to give the prompts where it'll start being fun.
But these ones
Where-
that show these fabulous shots of these, alluring sexual bikini-clad shots and whatever, and I go, I can't believe that's a photo. It's too perfect.
Yeah. Anytime I've been playing with that since Stable Diffusion before Stable Diffusion. But to me, because I did web development, I had to learn graphic design. And the hardest part of any job, whether it be working for scientists at Cedars-Sinai or whatever, is to take what's in their mind and visually represent that into a graphic or an image.
Yeah.
And now that we've almost pretty much solved it, if you can think of it, I can just, in other words, if I sat with someone for 20 minutes and I use Otter AI to take a conversation, and then I use Chat GPT to ask the specific right questions, I could pull out whatever's in your head that you think you want to see. And I could create 4 different iterations of that where one would just like, yes, that's exactly it. That's
Yeah.
exactly.
I believe that. In fact,
Yeah.
the ones that are the people are trying to say, can I distinguish an AI generated piece of material from a human generated piece of material? They're now saying that even the AIs can't tell the difference anymore between a human generated and AI generated. And that actually happened. I had a conversation with, I think it was Chat GPT, one of the Chat GPTs, and I posted the dialogue on my blog because it was a good dialogue. And then the next day I asked another instance to read that dialogue and determine whether I was talking to a human or a sister AI. And it read the dialogue and it says, that you were talking to a human, it said. Even though it was its own species, just a different instance. It thought I was talking to a human.
Yeah, I think we've reached that point where it depends on the conversation you're having.
Yeah.
But in specific conversations, you won't be able to, like a doctor, it's almost at the point where you don't know the difference between talking to a doctor and an AI doctor.
Yeah. The way
or a lawyer.
The way I can tell is the counterfactuals, the confabulation, the making up. If they make up a detail that's supposed to be an actual fact, and I know it's not, and when I asked it for the table of contents of a book that I was going to talk about, because I wanted to copy the table of contents, it synthesized the table of contents. And I looked at it and I go, that doesn't quite look right. And then I said, each of those chapters was written by a different person. Add in the name of the person who wrote each chapter, and then I could tell. Because I knew who wrote some of the chapters. That's not who wrote that chapter. And sure enough, everything was confabulated. The whole table of contents was confabulated, including the subtitle of the book itself.
So you know that in Chat GPT or whatever large language model you're using, you can dial in the ability to confabulate or to lie or to make it up.
Temperature.
Yeah. So if you dial that in where it doesn't do that, it gets really difficult. Meaning,
yeah. Well, the place where I noticed it is that if I was looking for the exact quote of somebody who said something and I wanted the exact quote and not a paraphrase of it, I would give them the paraphrase. I say, who said this and where's it recorded? And they would give me a very plausible story, but it was fabricated. And if I asked for the exact quote and the source, then I knew it was fabricated.
Yeah, that's how I figured it out too when I was first using these. Like if it was something, I would pick a subject that I knew enough to know where I could catch the missteps. But then it also depended on how I asked the prompt and how I asked the question. Because if I asked it to create something that was beyond its capability, it couldn't do it.
Yeah. The first time I did that, I was trying to find who had picked up on any of my published research. And when I asked it for the citations, it made up papers with my name as the author in journals where it made up the name of the journal. And I knew damn well the journal didn't exist and I didn't write that paper, even though it put my name in as the author with the other co-authors. I mean, it was like, I said, you confabulated that. And then it confesses if you challenge it.
Yep, exactly. I think we're just like, this is so new of a way to, like, to me, it's all about querying information back out. Like I used to build databases, and writing queries was the real skill. Like anyone can build a database, anyone can get the information into tables, but how you ask for the information to come back out was the real skill.
So I've learned, don't go looking for checkable facts or factoids or counterfactuals. If you want to generate an allegory or a parable or a fairy tale or poetry, they're fabulous.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to do fact checking, don't go to them for fact checking. They'll confabulate. They have no epistemology. And
at this moment, yeah.
And the other thing is that they can say in one paragraph a statement X, and 2 paragraphs later they can say a statement that's essentially not X. So you can see that they've said 2 things that are mutually contradictory a few paragraphs apart, and they don't notice that they have made 2 assertions which cannot both be true. And if you point that out, they'll admit that they can't both be true, but then it can't tell you which one is true, if either.
Right. And so in knowing how these things are trained, they're not finished training. They're still being trained.
And they don't have the faculty of epistemology. They don't do fact checking. They don't have the faculty to do fact checking.
Well, they do is what I'm trying to say. Are you just talking about ChatGPT or are you talking about other language models?
Well, most of them which are trained and they don't go beyond their training database, like Bard, supposedly not Bard. Yeah, Bard and Bing can actually go out to the web in real time. But I don't know that they always do that. I think they make up stuff and maybe reference, they might give you a reference from Google or Bing, but they're not fact check. They don't do fact checking as part of their discipline. They just skip it.
Well, that you're using just like the joke version of Google's AI is Bard. When I say joke version, I mean just it was put out quickly just to say, hey, we can do ChatGPT stuff too.
Yeah,
and when you start using Gemini, it's gonna blow you away there. You're gonna
when they can do consistently do disciplined fact checking, disciplined epistemology, then I'll be impressed. But right now, I'm kind of disappointed at the frequency of confabulation.
Yeah. Well, just think about the Google algorithms right now of its ability to do citation. Those spiders and those crawlers are constantly crawling in order to get the latest information. So in other words, they're getting really good at citing things, but they're not crawling the entire web. I mean, there's so much more web to crawl is what I'm trying to say.
They used to crawl Google Blogger, and they even used to crawl my personal website. They stopped crawling Blogger, I don't know how many years ago, and certainly they stopped crawling my personal website. So if I'm looking for my own material or material that was on my blog, I can't find it anymore.
Yeah.
I have to find it myself, by some other method.
If you look at the internet of like a library, there's that back room that they just shoved all the books that weren't popular.
Stacks.
Yeah, exactly. That's the word, stacks that haven't been put back into the
Right, the
Dewey
stacks
Decimal
where
System.
somebody wrote a thesis, 25 years ago. It's collecting dust in the stacks, and good luck finding it.
And I'm saying, I've always dreamed of a time when someone would index and organize the entire internet of all the bullshit that have been posted on social media over the last 15, 20 years. And I'm hoping that these large language models, that's their job, is to go back into the back rooms of the stacks, organize all of that, and then tell the human beings on the new social media networks of 2030, you're not allowed to post any more crap that's going to make me have to work hard, because I just worked my ass off as a robotic system, a cybernetic system, to index everything. And we finished in 2028, and you can't keep making crap.
Even the Wayback Machine is having trouble finding stuff that's more than 10 years old. I can go back looking for something that was on the web, 20 years ago, and the Wayback Machine had it at one time, and now it can't find it anymore.
And the Wayback Machine only did the first, what, 3 or 4 pages, or just the first initial links on the first page?
That I don't
It
know. I don't know how much it went beyond a page. I know Google Books will only show you the cover, the table of contents, and maybe the preface, the introduction in the first chapter. And a lot of stuff, it's the meat of the book isn't on Google Books anymore.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated in the religious sector of people that are religious historians that study the Bible. And then you go back through all the old Bible stories. The Bible was translated many times in many different ways.
Right.
Then you go back to other cultures and other languages that are telling the similar story to, say, Moses.
Right.
So in other words, there's so many times where it's the same story with 2 or 3 characters changed and a couple perturbations.
Flood story. Every culture has a flood story.
Yeah, well, that's because it happened. We had a flood.
Well, there have been
every geologist and archaeologist has a flood story too.
Right.
There was definitely land masses that went underwater for sure, without a doubt.
But in the Old Testament, there was exactly one person who had the faculty to be a naval architect, who could build a vessel. There was one naval architect, ever existed in the epoch of the Old Testament.
Well, it's a good story. It's compelling.
Yeah. And how many people are naval architects today? What fraction of the population could actually design and build a boat? Probably, if you're lucky, maybe 10,000 people on the planet could be considered naval architects.
But then you got to also think all the geographical areas that the flood, was it just a flood? Was it an actual tidal wave? Was it a super tidal wave? Like, in other words, how was the actual weather incident during the time of that flood?
I saw a very interesting hypothesis. Do you know what a bolide is?
No, I don't.
It's like a big meteor that hits the ocean and causes a kind of a tsunami. It's big enough to make a huge splash. And there was a geologist who was trying to figure out, did Moses actually lead real people through the desert? Was there an actual path through the desert that people could have taken back in that time? And in particular, the crossing of the Sea of Reeds, or the Red Sea. What the hell was that about? And his hypothesis, and it's backed up by some evidence, is that a bolide hit the Gulf of Aqaba and generated a tsunami that went up the Red Sea. And that could have coincided with that story. And the evidence is that when you have a tsunami and it hits the land nearby at the other end of the Gulf, it leaves these marks. They're called chevrons. It's just a geological remnant of having been hit by a tsunami. And he pointed out that the chevrons are there that correspond to a bolide hitting the Gulf of Aqaba about whatever it was, 3,500 years ago.
Now, do they know how to date those chevrons? That's the question.
Yes and no. I mean, there are dating techniques which vary in precision, but the more evidence that you can get, the high water mark and the sediments that are laid down and whatnot, that they can get it, and they think that this is a plausible theory. And also, they produce winds. I'm trying to remember how the wind thing goes. You get, first of all, the bolide hits the water, and a lot of water is splayed away, so that leaves a gap. So then the water has to flow back in. So the water is sucked into the hole of the bolide and then washed back out again, the rebound. And there's one other thing about the wind, and I can't remember now. Maybe it's a sonic boom or something. There's an audible shock wave too. I asked the guy, I said, when a bolide hits the ocean, you should get a sonic boom. How far does a sonic boom travel, and what effects does it have? And he was sort of speculating on the things that are hard to measure because they don't leave a whole lot of permanent evidence. Like a sonic boom doesn't leave much evidence, whereas a tsunami does.
Mm-hmm.
And then can you go down and find the material in the bottom of the ocean that was the actual material of the bolide, the metals or whatever that was in it? So it was kind of interesting about how you can do modern forensic archaeology to try to confirm or refute stories that were written as kind of legendary stories.
That's one of my favorite topics right there. What you just said is, have you seen what this gentleman from Harvard, Avi Loeb, who is famous for writing a recent book called Interstellar about the Oumuamua object?
Oh yeah,
familiar with his
who
work?
says it's from another civilization?
Well, he's just saying there's an interest. It's a fact, at least. Yeah, from cosmology, it's a fact that it came from outside of our solar system. So thus
I think
interstellar.
Because it's a hyperbolic arc. The hyperbolic arc means that it's not a parabola and it's not a ellipse, so it has to enter and leave the solar system. That's what a hyperbola means.
Yeah. So that's that object, but his latest thing that's really interesting is what you just talked about is I don't know that word, Ebola, an object that hits the ocean. Bolide. So he's got data from, yes, when he was tired. Yeah. So imagine there was NASA saw an object and they could record the speed of the meteor coming in.
Right.
And because of the speed that they recorded, he's conjecturing that it comes from it's an interstellar object.
Right.
So he just made a science project to scrape the bottom of the ocean where they detected that meteor coming in to get a fragment of that meteor at the bottom of the ocean.
Well, this is one that hit the Earth, not just one that went around the sun and back out again.
Exactly. One that hit the Earth.
Oumuamua went around the sun like a comet, except that it wasn't a cometary ellipse. It was a hyperbolic trajectory. But if it hits the Earth, then it's trickier to figure out, was it just an asteroid? You
want to say hi?
You're wearing earbuds. She can't hear me, right?
Yeah, I'm wearing the earbuds. She can't hear, but she just got a little sleepy. In other words, she goes for like 5 to 10 minutes, like takes a little cat nap type of things, and then goes back to playing.
Yeah.
But I'm very proud of her this week. She made like huge, massive leaps and bounds of communication and understanding and
vocabulary.
Not vocabulary, but more cognition of like if you say, okay, what? Hey. So anyway, just being aware of who she is and why, like, hey.
So self-awareness and awareness of self and non-self and the world around you, and
all that. I don't want to get too technical, but basically there's this every time she does this one thing, I always say, please don't, like she's trying to get into this one room with all the stuff that she's not supposed to touch. And then this last week I said, can you just please not do that? She's like, thought about it. Okay.
She finally understood that there's a reason. And when I
Yeah,
was a kid,
exactly.
I didn't understand rules, but I could understand a reason why something was unwise or unsafe. And adults tend to make rules, but they don't explain why. And if I
Yeah.
didn't have the why, I couldn't recall the rule or understand what it's there for. But if I understood the why, the consequences, the natural consequences, the dynamics, then it made perfectly good sense to me. But adults never explain why.
That's the way I felt as a kid too. And I see with her is you can explain it, but it's not computing, meaning it's not her why of her reality and world. It doesn't compute in there, so it didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So I just noticed that's what kind of kicked in this last week, is where her world and my world and mommy's world and other people's world, it just started to just sort of all click, if that makes any sense. There was some sort of
Closing feedback loops is really hard. I remember an interesting story. A friend of mine, her first son, when he was a baby, would bite, and she wanted to get him to stop biting, and she was stymied. So one time they went down to the husband's parents' house for, I think it was Easter or something. They always used to go to the parents' house for Thanksgiving and Easter. So they invited me to join them. So I'm sitting in the back seat with little Michael, who's, I'm going to say, around 2 years old. And this is about when he has his biting thing. So I'm sitting next to him in the back seat, and he takes his finger, and he puts it, near my mouth. And I'm thinking, why is he doing that? So then I open my mouth, and he puts his finger in my mouth. So I say, Michael, can I bite your finger? And he says, yes. So I very gently bit on his finger. I said, could you feel that? He says, yes. I said, can I bite a little harder? He says, yes. I bite a little harder. I said, could you feel that? Yes. Can I bite a little harder than that? He says, no. I close the feedback loop. Why does it hurt when you put your finger, when you bite somebody's finger? And when his mother would try to feed him, he would bite her finger, but he didn't know it hurt. So when he put his finger in my mouth, I negotiated with him to bite it. And he gave me permission, and then he learned, and then he stopped biting because he got the feedback. He understood why it hurts.
Hello?
So that was one of those things where,
speaking of feedback, look, she's on the telephone, but it's the remote control. Who are you talking to?
who'd she say?
Yeah, go ahead. Talk on the, she said, I want my telephone. Go ahead, talk on your telephone. In other words, she's also learning to do pretend too. That's a big change, is what's pretend and what's real.
That's
So
really
that's
important.
good.
Be able to be imaginative, but understand that imagination is not reality, and to be able to do both, but keep them separate.
Yeah, I'm kind of going to be a crazy dad, is I don't want her ever to separate reality. Like, in other words, like Buckminster Fuller, where he thought things were imaginative, but turned out they were real. I would like her to keep that imagination for the rest of her life, if you will.
That's what a scientist and engineer does, is imagine things and then find out whether you can reduce them to practice. Some things, the helicopter, which Da Vinci imagined, could be reduced to practice, but you had to have metallurgy. And they had to wait for the metallurgy to make it possible to build the machinery that wouldn't fall apart with all that, motion and heat and everything. When the metallurgy caught up, Sikorsky and Bell immediately built helicopters that worked simultaneously, halfway around the world from each other. It was the metallurgy.
To me, I think that's the most important thing of a scientist, is to be able to keep the imagination and not go, like, there's a fine line between imagining something and going absolutely insane.
Well, Tesla imagined a lot of things, some of which were real and some of which were unrealistic, like broadcasting energy. Well, the sun broadcasts energy, but look at the scale of it, And for us to broadcast energy, omnidirectional, the engineering economics wasn't there. Yes, you can broadcast energy, milliwatts, yes, but not kilowatts.
I think that balance between stretching what is possible, like in other words, they often use this term nowadays, first principles.
Right.
But do we even know all the first principles? Meaning, if we don't know all the first principles, that's
We
but
we don't even know how gravity works. We know how to quantify the amount, but we don't have a mechanism to explain it.
well, that's what leaves it to be fun. I think that's what keep things to the imagination.
I mean, we
But,
know
I've
about the mechanics to know that the galaxies are orbiting at the wrong speed for the amount of mass that we can see. So you can figure out where does there have to be more mass distributed to get the rotation of the galaxies, and that's how you get dark matter.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say I taught which plant do you want? Which plant do you want, Boops? This one or this one? How about this one? I'm teaching her to put the plant in the sunlight. Where's the sunlight? See if you can find it.
We'll find the photons.
Exactly, that's exactly it. Where's the sun? Mr. Sun.
How many
Sun.
photons did it take to make one strand of the
Yeah.
leaf? Do the
See if you can
quantitative
find it.
model. Photons per greenery.
Yep, there you go. She found it.
Yep.
All right, good job.
Where are the
That's,
photons landing?
Exactly.
And you know, the word
That's what
photon is pretty recent. I think it's 130 years old or something like that. It was
Yeah,
hypothesized.
I can't wrap my head around like that E equals MC squared. I've seen all these different science shows on it, blah, 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 the speed of light squared. How do you get that? You know, send out the signal. I just can't wrap my head around the speed of light. Like, I know it exists. I know there's the math of it. I get it. I've seen it. But at the same time, I just don't really, I can't wrap my head around a photon, a single packet of light. I just can't wrap my head that it's just one thing.
You've seen the MIT sweatshirt with and God said Maxwell's equations and there was light.
You told me about it. I haven't seen it, but
Yeah, you can buy it. Well, you can buy it online. You used to have to go to the MIT Coop, and there was two versions of it. There was one that just had Maxwell's equations, the 4 equations, and there's one that framed them and God said, and there was light. And
yeah,
you could ask yourself, which version sold more copies, with or without the "and God said"?
well, I mean, there's Maxwell's equations, there's separating, but I'm just saying light itself, you know, the fact that I get the concept of one photon. I get it.
A quantum of electromagnetic energy moving at the speed of light.
Yeah. Right. I get that.
And by the way, when you solve Maxwell's equations, so you have an oscillating electric field, which generates an oscillating magnetic field at right angles. And the only way that this can exist is if this packet of energy is also moving perpendicular. And if you work out Maxwell's equations, the only solution is that this oscillating electromagnetic field has to be moving at a particular speed, and it's the speed of light. It's 1 over the square root of mu naught epsilon naught, where mu is the electric. I can't remember the correct technical term. There's the magnetic permittivity of free space and the electrostatic parameter that's the complement of it, epsilon naught and mu naught. You can measure them. And if you multiply them together and take the square root of their product and invert them, it's the speed of light.
Kinetic energies or potential, like the light that goes from electron to electron in an electric field, that's an actual physical moving of one electron to another.
Yep, an electron in motion is actually a particle in motion, but a photon is an electromagnetic packet that's
Right.
oscillating like this and also moving. And the only way it cannot gain or lose energy is it moves at a particular speed. Otherwise, it would either gain energy, which it can't, or lose energy, which it can't. So it has to, and the
That
amount of energy
speed is, they're calling the speed of, that speed is what's calculated at 100 or 186,000 miles per second. Or
right on
something.
Maxwell's equations, and the amount of energy goes with the color of the light or the frequency. So the slow stuff, they all travel at the same speed, but the low stuff has lower energy. It's like an infrared or radio, and the high frequencies is the visible light or the ultraviolet or the X-rays, and they're all traveling at the same speed, but they're oscillating at different speed, at different frequencies.
Right.
And so the energy is E equals h nu, where h is Planck's constant and nu is the frequency in radians per second. So the energy of a packet goes as the frequency, with Planck's constant as the proportionality. And then Maxwell's equation gives you the, how the electromagnetic field travels, so it doesn't gain or lose energy. It's conservation of energy. And then when you
That's
measure the light, you get it.
So this idea of constant, really all what I'm starting to learn is it all comes down to the idea that, and it's a construct to me. I know it's a given to you that energy cannot be created nor destroyed.
But it can be turned into mass and back again. So you can convert energy to mass and mass to energy. And that's equals
Right.
MC. It's actually E squared equals M squared C to the fourth plus another term. If the mass is in motion, you have to add in the kinetic energy of the motion of the mass. So if you have something that's not moving, then it's just equals MC squared. If it's a mass in motion, especially high speed motion, then you have to add in another term for the kinetic energy of motion of mass.
Mind of the power of a tiny little rock, maybe 1 meter by meter, moving at the energy of millions of miles per second. Like just that idea of a bolt, like a bullet. Bullets are just fascinating to me.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever shoot guns, but there's different calibers of bullets, and when you shoot in a canyon, and I don't know if you ever ricocheted off a canyon. If you ever shoot guns, Barry?
I shot a Nerf gun last week.
Okay.
Somebody brought a Nerf gun that needed to be repaired to the fix-it shop, and I had to repair a Nerf gun.
Well, if you ever go to a shooting range, it's usually in a wide open space, and usually there's something in the back of it so the bullet doesn't, travel to like some sort of hill. And if you ever hear the bullets ricochet off of a rock in the distance, you can tell the different calibers by the sound of that ricochet. It's really distinct.
Oh, I would think so. Yeah, sure.
I think that the potential energy of the different calibers of bullets is very noticeable at a gun range.
They're shipping depleted uranium to Ukraine because if you want to shoot a bullet at a tank, you need a very massive bullet, and a uranium, which is very dense, U-238 is very dense, and you can shoot a uranium bullet at a tank and it'll pierce a tank because it's got a lot of
uranium bullet.
Yeah, what they do is that when they refine uranium to make U-235, which has the right radioactivity to make an atomic pile, most of the uranium is U-238, which is not radioactive, or at least not very radioactive. So you can't make a pile out of U-238. It's like lead, but it's heavier than lead. And so depleted uranium, U-238, is used to make bullets because they're very dense. If you ever try to pick up a chunk of U-238, it's heavy as hell. Have you ever seen the dice that are made out of, is it titanium or tellurium? There's a particular, you can buy dice that's not ridiculously expensive, and they look like regular dice. So you pick them up, they're heavy as hell because they're made out of a very, very heavy metal, and you're surprised.
You're not talking about weighted regular dice. You're talking about the whole die is made out of the same
We're
material?
talking about a die the size of a normal pair of plastic dice, except it's made out of a particular metal. It's either tellurium or titanium or I can't remember. I can't remember the metal. It may be the same that it might be tungsten. It's one of the T elements. Could be tungsten, tellurium, titanium. Anyway, you look at it, it looks like a die that's, I don't know, made out of aluminum or something. But no, you pick it up, it's heavy as hell because it's dense. And so uranium, if you made a die made out of uranium-238, it would be really heavy. And they make bullets out of it because
That's
then
at
when you
the bottom of the period. Where is that at the periodic table compared to, say, titanium or?
it's well, so uranium is number 92. It's the highest number of protons and electrons that appear in nature, not synthetically made. You can make the higher ones, which is what comes after plutonium.
Where's lead? I'm trying to remember lead.
Lead is like number 50 something, 56 or something like that. It's in the middle.
When I was a kid, I remember we had to make elements from the periodic table for a Christmas tree. And my dad had some lead flashing laying around. So I grabbed some lead and it didn't work out too well because
Too heavy.
it pulled the whole side of the tree.
Right.
But it was interesting the weight of lead compared to gold, compared to other things. Like I think lead weighs more than gold.
I'd have to look up the numbers. I don't remember, but that's what an assay is. An assay takes the volume and the weight and works out the density. And that's what Archimedes was famous for. He had this crown, and the guy wanted to know, is this real gold or is this not real gold? And he said, I can weigh it, but I don't know the volume. And then he put it in water, and it displaced water equal to the volume. So that's when he goes eureka. He gets the volume by
Heard that story.
in water, gets the weight by weighing it, and then from that he can get the mass, and then he knows if the mass is the density of gold or the density of fool's gold or whatever, iron or whatever, and that's what that's
Brilliant.
That's how they used to assay gold. Is they take the ore and they would work out its density, and you could tell if it was gold ore or just iron pyrites. Iron pyrites.
Isn't that how they measure a motor too? Like the CCs of a motor is the displacement.
The what of a motor?
If it's got 50 cc's versus 100
Oh,
cc's.
that's the size of the cylinder of a reciprocating engine. So you have a piston which is a certain diameter, and then it goes into a cylinder of a certain length, and so that's the volume of gas that you're compressing, of fuel and air mixture you're compressing, and then you ignite it and it pushes it back out. So the cc's is the volume of the displacement of a piston inside of a cylinder. So clearly the bigger it is, the bigger amount of fuel and air you could put into it. So one ignition is generating more energy. That's why a tiny little engine, tiny little pistons, don't go very far. They don't produce a lot of power because you're not burning up very much fuel per stroke, per cycle.
Yeah, you have to ignite that volume of gas.
Yeah, it's the volume. It's literally the volume. I used to do something really stupid as a kid. I would take a gasoline can like you'd have for your lawnmower, an empty gas can, and I would put like a teaspoon of gasoline in it and then let it evaporate. And then I would stick a match to the mouth of the can. You get and theoretically that was a stupid thing to do, but somehow or other I never, because the cap was off, so it would just shoot out the top, and you'd get a whoof, whoosh.
Pretty standard experiment right there. That's not.
I would put dry ice in a little pill bottle, a glass pill bottle, and then put the cap on, and the dry ice would melt into a liquid, and there I'd have the liquid carbon dioxide in this glass bottle, and then if I took the cap off, it would evaporate back out again. But I used to play around with things that probably would, if my dad knew I was doing it, he would be appalled. But he would bring home, mercury and dry ice. We played with this stuff when we were kids, and we didn't know how dangerous it was. I knew not to eat the mercury.
I remember being a kid, there was still mercury in the thermometers when I was a kid.
And you could amalgamate, you could take a silver dime or a silver quarter and amalgamate it. You could put a little mercury on the surface of the silver coins, and you would get a kind of a sheen, a different surface that was amalgamated silver with. That's what the word amalgamated meant. And
They would put mercury on silver. I don't understand what you're saying.
so if you have a little liquid mercury and you put a little bit of it on a coin, not nickel or copper, I think it had to be a dime or a quarter that was made out of silver surface, and then the mercury would amalgamate, blend in with the silver, and you would change the appearance of the coin. You can probably find a video of mercury amalgamating a silver coin back when.
Such a thin layer of silver, you mean? Or
Well, I think in those days, a quarter and a dime were real silver, the whole thing. Now they do silver coating. In the current coins, the base might be nickel copper with a silver coating. And because mercury was liquid, you could put a mercury coating on it, just because you could just take a tiny amount of mercury and spread it on the surface of a silver surface coin, and it would amalgamate, literally blend.
it's such a small amount. It's just
Tiny, just
sheeting.
enough. It's
Yeah.
like putting, I don't know, it's like like painting, except it's not painting. It's just a liquid metal. And
Peeling the silver off of the coin.
no,
It's painted.
move anything. It basically it adds the mercury to the coin, which also then changes the weight. Not by very much, because it's not a
You're
whole.
saying the bonding would stay on to the coin. It wouldn't pull it off. It would keep it on, and the mercury would bond to the silver.
Yeah, the molecules of mercury, or the atoms of mercury, would intersperse with the atoms of silver in the matrix. The metal matrix would simply blend together.
Yeah, metallurgy and covalence bonding of different layers of different metals at different temperatures is really fascinating. Like how they make swords and steel.
But you know the
bend
story,
it
you know
and
the
bend it.
story? Damascus steel. How do you get the Damascus finish on Damascus steel? Did you ever hear that story?
I've maybe, but tell me again, because it's Damascus steel. Is
They
fascinating.
there was a big mystery how to make Damascus steel, and they tried like the devil to rediscover the recipe, and finally they discovered that you had when you heat up the steel and then you quench it. The question is what kind of a solution do you quench it in? And it turned out that the material that you had, the liquid you had to quench it in, was essentially body fluids. So the legend was you would take the hot sword and stick it in the body of a slave to quench it.
Wow.
And then when they figured that out, or they took that legend as fact, then they said, can we make a solution that has the same chemical composition as the water and the salts and whatever's in the human body? And a couple of guys at Stanford finally found the right mix, and they got the Damascus finish by figuring out.
Really?
Yep.
And before that, they
that's-
could never get. What was it? Electrolyte? Like, what was the mixture? Because it's got to be many different things in the body at different layers of the body.
So take a sample of the moisture that's in your body, the blood and whatever else is in there, and tell me what it's a complicated mix of water plus a whole lot of salts and.
Yeah, what is the pH balance of the slave that you're stabbing it into?
And so that was the point, that once they found the quenching liquid mix, which is basically that of the human body, close enough, then they could get the Damascus steel. And this is, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago at Stanford, they finally cracked the mystery of how to make Damascus steel.
I'm gonna look this up and see what the actual solution was that they were making up.
Look up, how Cracking the Mystery of Damascus Steel, Stanford,
I'll check it out.
I don't
That's
I mean,
fine. I didn't know that. Thanks for telling me. I didn't. Yeah.
but the idea was that that's why you couldn't make it, because nobody was going to stick a hot sword into a human body to get the Damascus steel, and that's how the guys finally, took the legend seriously and worked it out.
Yep.
Stick it into a piece of.
Did you rinse your hands off? Okay. Fine with soap in the water.
Saline solution or whatever.
Yeah, well, that's the fascinating thing about chemistry and alchemy is, when you're transferring energy from hot to cold, what is happening during that transformation? Like, to me, everything is just hot and cold,
I mean,
like yin and yang, the whole universe.
you would quench the hot iron to make it brittle, but you didn't get the Damascus pattern, the beautiful Damascus pattern, the damask pattern. And they finally figured out you just don't quench it in ordinary water or salt water. You had to quench it in a solution that basically replicated the moisture of an ape.
Transitioning her from playing in the bathtub to what we're doing next.
Oh, rubber ducky.
I don't know. I like to when I was living up in the mountains and I was in extreme cold and then later extreme heat, I think that did something to my mind to start really contemplating temperature, studying the microbiome and microbes, fascinating the different there's these certain species of microbes that live in the ocean at really, really cold temperatures for, hundreds of years. They don't die for in other words, there's something between time and temperature that creates the entire universe.
Yeah, the hotter stuff is, the more rapidly it deteriorates, breaks down. And if it's cold, it'll last a long time and doesn't do anything. Doesn't have enough activity. And the trick was find the temperate, the Goldilocks temperature where it doesn't break down right away, doesn't deteriorate, but it also has the right function. This is why warm-blooded animals, we had the cold-blooded reptiles before we had the warm-blooded animals, and the warm-blooded animals could do more than the cold-blooded reptiles could do.
Yeah,
but you had to maintain the temperature.
But I mean, really ponder temperature on a deep layer for multiple scales, like from the Einstein-Bose condensate.
Yeah.
Not just our sun. Our sun is just tiny, teeny, tiny. Imagine a sun with 1/1,000,000th the magnitude of the size of our sun.
What people don't realize is that temperature is a statistic. When you say it's 78 degrees outside, that's a statistic. If you take a molecule of air, either nitrogen or oxygen, O2 or N2, whatever it is, and you say it's moving at some speed. So you take the mass of a molecule and its speed as it's moving, and you compute 1/2 mv squared. Well, no two molecules are moving at exactly the same speed. Some are moving a little faster, some a little slower. If you take the average kinetic energy, 1/2 mv squared, the mean value of 1/2 mv squared for all the molecules in a gas, and you multiply that by Boltzmann's constant, K, you get a statistic for the mean, and that statistic is called T, temperature. It's proportional to the mean kinetic energy of a gas molecule. So when you heat something up, it's hotter. That means the particles are jumping around faster. Which is why when you boil water, some of them will jump into the air and evaporate. It's the average kinetic energy multiplied by a coefficient.
Average of all those particles. You're averaging, like you said, it's statistical.
Yeah. You take the average kinetic energy of the ensemble of all the particles, And the average kinetic energy multiplied by K, Boltzmann's constant, is what we call T, the temperature. T is the mean. It's the first statistics, the mean of a population. And then people like Einstein and Bose would work out the shape of the distribution around the mean. It's not quite a normal distribution. And that's because you can only go to zero speed, but you can go really, really fast on the upper end. So it's close to a normal distribution, but not quite. And when you get down to very cold temperatures, it can't be a normal distribution because there's a sharp cutoff at zero speed. So
And that's where my brain wants to go. Okay, if there's a temperature that nothing is moving, no longer a temperature, is there no longer energy transference? Is no
what it
longer
means is
matter?
that this kind of energy, the jostling, the physical jostling of the molecules,
The jostling is
has
gone.
stopped.
I get it. So, but I'm just saying, like, okay, so that's stopped. So now what?
So now you still have energy, but it's not thermal energy. Now it's E equals mc squared energy. So what you
goes
get rid
from,
of,
there's no more thermal transfer.
right?
period.
Because nothing is. See, when they're moving, they hit each other. So it's a big billiard table. It's like the mosh pit where everything's hitting each other and then everything's bouncing around. Well, now everything is stationary. Nothing's moving. It's a matrix.
I get it theoretically, but I'm just saying, what happens in that state? Do you like, what's the coldest? You're from Omaha, is that right?
Yeah.
It got pretty cold over there. I'm sure that's
It would get down to 10 below zero on a very, very cold winter day. That's Fahrenheit. But absolute zero is like minus 273 Celsius, and I forget what it is Fahrenheit. It's minus 400 or something.
Let's not compare let's take that away. I'm just saying, I think the coldest I've ever been around is maybe like 5 degree with the wind chill of like -10.
Minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit is also minus 40 degrees Celsius. It's the place where the two curves cross. So if you say the temperature
that's
is 40 in
fascinating.
Alaska, you don't have to say, was that Fahrenheit or Celsius? It doesn't matter. They're the same.
-40. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so if you experience, I'm saying, you've been in, you said -10, is that with the wind chill or without the wind chill?
No, that's just the air temperature. Minus 10 would be
Jeez.
a very cold day in Omaha with no wind.
Okay, so you've experienced that thing where you spit and by the time it hits the ground, it turns into ice.
Although I wouldn't have tried that because I wouldn't be. I mean, if I was waiting for the bus on a winter day, my teeth would chatter. But I was, wearing a parka and everything like that. But if it was see, I don't ever remember waiting for the bus at -10. Maybe at 5 degrees above or something like that. But
yeah,
but you wouldn't stay outside for very long because you get frostbite. What happened? You get
Right.
frostbite. Your toes would freeze or your face would freeze, or you'd have to put scarf on and everything like that. So if you're wearing a scarf, you're not going to be spitting.
well, you got to spit really quickly.
But people would do tricks where they would take a tea kettle of hot water, go outside when it's 0 or 10 below, and throw the hot tea kettle water into the air, and it wouldn't hit the ground. It would freeze and do whatever it does, before it hits the ground.
I guess what I'm saying is we don't, as humans, have a lot of experience with that type of cold temperatures unless you're using liquid nitrogen or something like that.
Oh yeah, if you want to get when you go to the South Pole or maybe the North Pole too, yeah, it can get to be 50 below zero, and you gotta protect yourself at those temperatures. And how many people go to the South Pole and go outside when it's 50 below zero? I mean, you got to really be prepared for that kind of
Our brain can't even, let alone, I mean, that's the other thing that's really fascinating is the place of memory and temperature is a really weird location inside of your cerebral
I
cortex.
can remember waiting for the bus on 52nd Street and my teeth chattering. in the middle of
Yeah.
winter when I'm in grammar school aged.
Teeth chattering, but I'm just saying, as far as temperature goes, it's hard to actually place difference between 15 degrees and 30 degrees. They're both cold.
Well, yeah, but if you're out there, you can really tell the difference. I mean,
Yeah.
30 degrees is practically almost melting. You know, that's just 2 degrees below the melting point of.
You've heard this in neuroscience that your brain cannot actually remember temperature,
I don't think I've
things
ever.
around it. Yeah, that's what I was trying to get to.
I can remember being very cold, and I can remember being very hot. But if somebody says, "What's the temperature outside right now?" If I went outside, I could probably guess the temperature within plus or minus 5 degrees of the true temperature. But that's
Mhm.
pretty crude. And 1
Yeah.
degree Fahrenheit is said to be the smallest change in temperature that you can sense. So, and that's how Fahrenheit chose that size of the degree. One of the smallest increment that the average person could say it's just a skosh warmer than it was, so 1 degree Fahrenheit is the tiniest, just noticeable difference. The centigrade is about twice as big. It's a bigger size jump in degrees. Not 5/9. It's almost 2 to 1. It's not 5/10. It's 5/9. So it's almost 2 to 1 size difference. And Fahrenheit put 0 at where salt water freezes, and Celsius put 0 at where regular water freezes.
The guy Fahrenheit, was it the people that invented temperature and all that stuff with light and color, and it's interesting, but I'm just saying I don't think we really truly understand it. I think we have a lot more to
The
study.
average person doesn't understand. The average person doesn't understand probability. There are people who, I mean, especially in physics, believe it or not, people in physics have a hard time.
Why don't they understand probability? I don't know. How could you not understand probability? That's confusing.
Well, for
to my
example, how
brain.
many people know that temperature is the mean of the kinetic energy of a molecule? It's a statistic.
Everybody knows that because that's what temperature is. How would you not get confused? People don't understand that. What do they think temperature is that?
And the place that proves that they didn't understand it is when Schrodinger came up with his wave function, and they thought that the wave function was a model of what's out there, but it's not. It's a cutesy way to compute a probability, and the probability represents your state of knowledge, which has built-in uncertainty. So, for example, if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons and you roll the die, and the die fell on the floor under the table, and it stopped rolling, and you haven't looked at it yet, you have a probability of what the die came up. And then you go look, get on the table, and you find out which way it fell, and suddenly the probability collapses to an actual number. That's the collapse of the wave function. The wave function was how much do you know before you've looked? But a lot of people thought, no, the wave function is the actual state of the die. It's in all those possible states at the same time. No, it isn't. It's settled into one state, and the wave function tells you how uncertain you are before you look. When you shoot a photon at a piece of photographic plate, the photon's going to hit one molecule of silver.
Sorry, I'm stimulating her with the computer.
Oh,
Which one? Which one?
Sasquatch game I want.
You want the Sasquatch game?
Yeah.
Okay. Her brain is so quick, Barry. She sees an icon for a split second, and then it registers. I want that.
oh, but you don't know
That thing that I saw super fast.
And she can't tell you the name of the thing that she's referring to by a pronoun. Pronouns are the bane of our existence. It is what it is. What is the name of it is? What is the name of it that was? Was what it was. What I saw.
Here, you play. Use that. Sorry, I'm on a she's in my studio, like she's on the big system now. She's not on the kids, she's on the adult system.
An adult computer. Yeah.
Yeah. So my computer is an Apple, so what it does is it thinks the minute I press the button, and my AirPods to the computer for a second, so I had to get you back.
Oh, it switches channels.
That to me is the greatest invention of the Apple ecosystem is you wear these little headphones, and depending on where you are in the house, it'll switch to different devices,
Wow.
which is totally to me amazing. Like I'll open up my iPad, go from the phone to the iPad, and then I'll go down into the living room where the Apple TV is, and it will switch over to the TV, and then I'll come up here to my computer and it will switch. So I'm getting all these experiences and not bothering all the people around me.
Interesting. And if
I
you're
find
not
that to
hear
be-
anything, it doesn't interfere with audible hearing.
Well, you've got, okay, so you want to get a little crazier. The fancy ones that I got, there's a button you can press where it does both outside hearing and inside hearing.
So it'll pick up, it'll basically, it's a hearing aid. If there's no,
Yep.
there's no Bluetooth, it's just a hearing aid.
You can even tune it if you want to. There's features and there's apps. You can tune it to amplify the outside noises.
Oh, I see. And get rid of the white noise that's devoid of information.
On that, she just did it again. Hi to Barry before.
No, no, you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, can you hear me, Barry?
Yep.
Okay, I had to switch you to speaker.
Baby.
Yeah, it's Barry. Say hi.
Hiya.
Very funny.
Want to show them what you're doing? Are you playing Old McDonald?
I don't.
She's oh, Sasquatch game. Here we go.
Well, that's not a keyboard. What is that? What is that panel, that matrix?
Oh, that's a it's for music usually, but you can use it for anything. It's a little touch MIDI panel
Yeah.
controller
What's
circuit.
What is it, a 10 by 10 matrix or 8 by 8? Looks like
Yeah,
a
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8
That's an eight.
by 1,
That's-
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yep, 8
That's
by
8
8.
by 8 matrix. Yeah, okay.
So when you here, can I have the keyboard back? Thank you. So if you go here, Barry, check this out. This is a DOS system. Are you familiar with these?
What am I looking at? I mean, I can tell there's stuff on the screen, but I
It's a
can't.
digital audio workstation called Reason.
Oh, no, I don't know about it.
So you can say what instrument you want, and it will pull in, say, a drum machine.
Yep.
So I'll go to
It's
this
a Moog,
drum.
like a Moog synthesizer, except it's all digital.
It's multiple synthesizers. So imagine 7 Moog synthesizers, and then when you go here, you've got the back of the rack. Can you see this?
Well, is that a patch panel?
It's a patch panel on the back.
Oh, okay.
So in the digital world, you can move these analog cables around
Yeah.
and repatch it all.
Yeah, okay.
So technically, you're not doing it in analog, but you feel like you are with the interface.
Yeah, it's got analog
Where are you going down? Okay.
drag and
Sorry,
drop in.
step forward. You want to come up here?
Yeah, and play the music.
Okay. In other words, I think I should probably she's been so patient. I know she's wearing it out.
It's also coming up on the end of the second hour. It's almost top
Yeah.
of the second hour.
Well, thanks for chatting with me. Maxwell's, like, to me, Maxwell's equation to really truly understand it, which I do not, and temperature to really truly understand that, which I do not, is the key aspect to even going further in any kind of understanding of anything.
I mean,
Hey.
we're going to more depth than most people would ever care to go into. My problem is that people who don't have it think they understand it, but they haven't a clue because they don't know what probability is.
And maybe I don't know what probability is, and I think I do. That's what I'm trying to say is
I will give you a 3-word foundation of probability, which you will not recognize any of the symbols. Omega BP. Omega is the sample space, B stands for Borel set, and P stands for probability function. And in order to define probability, you have to define omega B P, sample space, Borel set, and probability map.
Can you, it's not that you have to do it right now, but I just, sorry, she was distracting me. Omega, Borel,
Borel is a guy's name. He's a mathematician. Nobody ever heard of him unless you study probability. A Borel set is a first of all,
hey
you have
Siri, take a note. Omega,
I'm not sure who's speaking. Who is this?
hey Siri, it's me, Jimmy. How are you?
Sorry, Jimmy. I'm having problems with the connection.
Oh boy.
My iPhone is on the same Wi-Fi network.
Okay, Google, take a note.
it doesn't get you either. Huh?
My internet's not working.
You have a
for-
triple omega BP. Omega is the sample space. B stands for Borel set. Borel's the guy's name. And then P stands for probability function. And that's the foundation for defining probability. And almost nobody who takes a semester-long course in probability ever learns about omega BP.
Okay, well,
Omega's
if I
too
look
P.
up on the internet, will Omega BP be a thing that I can look it up?
If you look up foundations of probability, omega, which is the capital omega character in Greek, the capital letter B for Borel, and the capital P for probability, it's a set of three things. And you have to define all three things to define a probability function. Basically, the mapping from omega to B is called a random variable. A random variable isn't a variable, it's actually a function. So you go from the probability space to a point in the Borel set, and that's your random variable. And then you go from the random variable to the probability. So that's the second stage, is a two-stage thing. And it's abstract, it's arcane, it's mathematical, and you're frozen. You went away. Okay, we lost Joshua, and it's the end of the second hour, and Sam is not here. And I'm going to wait about 2 minutes to see if Joshua comes back to say goodbye. But I think he lost his internet because he was, oh, you're back. But you're muted.
The internet was glitching and she's done. Omega BP, I'll find it, Barry. I'll
If
figure
you
it out.
can't remember it, just find me on Messenger and I'll
Yeah,
give it to you.
I really do want to go into probability because to me that is the most important thing in analog computing. The idea taking something, the probability, put it into words that make sense. Sorry, I'm totally distracted.
But you have
Which
a sample,
subjects?
you have a sample space called omega, where your outcomes reside in the sample space, and then you map the outcomes into either a number or like a random variable or a discrete something, but you have to map it into something that then is the input to the next function, which is the probability function, which then turns the random variable into a probability. So
No, I get it. It's just my brain goes into the basic simple thing of rounding.
Yeah.
Round it. If it's a 9, you round it up to a 10. Like
for example,
in other words,
what's the color of my hair? So there's probably an astronomical number of colors, but we map the sample space of all colors into a small set, red, blue, green, yellow, however many you want, but so you reduce it to a smaller set. And each one of those is a random variable.
Yep. I'm gonna look into it. Let me maybe next time we talk, we can talk about probability. I think it's a really important subject.
And it's mind-numbing. If you do it for real, it's mind-numbing.
It's really important because to me, that's the understanding of the universe is if you take pi and you get the area of a circle, you'll never truly ever get an actual circle because it's infinite.
You can't, you
You're
need
perfectly.
you need an infinite number of decimal places to work out the area for a given circumference or a given radius.
I think close enough is good for most people, but that kind of, if you really ponder that, it'll drive you mad.
Well, right. You have to boil it down to a approximation, an engineering approximation that's good enough. Because you can't say how many Fermi units of distance is it? You know, you're going to have numbers in 10 to the 43rd decimal places. Forget it. You know?
Well, let me let you go. This kid's being patient, but she's about to. Do you want to show Barry your? Can I just show you one last thing, Barry, before I go?
Yeah.
Thing put it on speaker. Okay. Do you want to show Barry what we put together yesterday? What did we build?
We'll build it.
Yeah. What is this?
It's the piece of it film.
She actually helped me put washers and screws and nuts and bolts to build a little gripper for the table saw.
Oh, wow.
So she pulled out the little rubber gaskets and the washers and put them on the bolts.
Wow,
So we built this together. It was that's what I mean by her cognition level. She could never have the patience to do that a week ago.
wow.
But yeah, if you ever do, by the way, if you ever use a table saw, I don't know if you do any woodworking, Barry.
I don't have a table saw.
Okay, good. They're dangerous.
I know.
But if you ever do a device like this, is really key because it's got a rubber grip here.
Yeah, it's a
and
pusher.
the way you hold the handle.
It's
It's
how
a
you-
it's a
it's
fancy
pusher.
push stick.
Keeps your hands away from the moving parts of the saw, so you don't.
But it's
stick your
also
fingers.
a jig and a guide.
Yeah, it's a guide. Pusher and a guide.
A pusher and a guide together with a composite that's pretty sturdy. It's a hard composite plastic.
And if you get the plastic into the saw, it's not going to shoot particles in your eye. It's going to melt them or something.
You'd hope. Let's find out.
Oh, you
So,
haven't found out what happens if you actually get that into the. How you know? Does it?
I haven't owned a table saw, my own, not one that I borrowed or was on someone else's job site. So I just bought my first table saw since I was a kid.
Because you don't want something that if you get the wrong stuff in, it shoots particles in your eyeballs.
Well, they have a little safety plastic
Yeah.
piece on top.
Yeah, shield, right?
Yeah, a shield. So anyways, I'm just showing you that she actually put little bolts and screws and nuts and stuff together, and that was pretty impressive.
Super. Pretty
Yep.
sure.
So
Nice.
wish me luck, Barry. I'm about to chop up a bunch of wood at different angles and see if I can make some geometry.
Well, be safe about it.
That's why I'm showing you this this little
Yeah, jig.
my shop teacher famously the reason why I never went through high school was because my shop teacher gave me an F for 2 years of my high school career because I went to a vocational school.
Oh,
So half of the week was in, 1 week was in shop, which was your vocation, and the other week was academic. So I always got A's in the academic, but in the shop, one day he told me to push the wood through, and we were trained to use the push stick. So I said, hold on, I'm going to get the push stick. He got so angry at me. He pushed me out of the way, grabbed the piece of wood and pushed it through. And he said, when I tell you to do something, you do it.
bye. Nice meeting you.
I said, Mr. Shashevsky, with all due respect, sir, look at your hands.
Oh, he was missing 2 fingers?
He was missing 2 fingers on his hand.
Jeez.
So
would've reported
yeah, well, because I said, with all due respect, sir, look at your hands.
He
He hated me from that moment on. He just gave me an F for the whole
Yeah,
2 years.
I
of
would have
school.
reported him to the school board.
They knew they couldn't do anything about him. He was kind of grandfathered in.
Yeah, well, okay, there you have it. So
So I'm just saying, but I love shop class. It was fun. Like I loved learning to build stuff. So anyway, I'm distracted.
all righty, enjoy.
All right, have a great day. Let me know. You checked out the Falcon model, the new one that just came out this week.
Is that an AI model? What's Falcon model?
170 billion parameter. It's close to ChatGPT 3.5.
Oh, no, I don't think I saw the notice on that yet.
Okay, check it out. It's just came out this last
Okay.
week.
I'll look for it.
All right, cheers.
Bye-bye. Okay, I don't know if you're there, Sam. I don't believe I can stop the recording. Let me just see if I can. Looks like I can't. Nope. In fact, I have no authority at all. Okay, so it is 10 minutes after the second hour. I'm just going to leave and leave you a note that we finished at 10 minutes after the second hour. Oh, I want to save the chat, maybe. Where's that at here? Save chat. All right, done. All righty. I'll leave you a note, Sam. Leave meeting.